Hello friends, welcome back to the channel and to the second video in our series on how to craft the Apollo 11 money box by hand. In this video, we'll focus on creating the white frame located on the back side of the space shuttle. This project is incredibly fun to make, and if you'd like to follow along, you can find a template for this spaceship in the link provided in the description box below. For this part, I'll be using 2 pieces of 2mm vegetable tan leather to add more volume and durability, along with some white goat skin to create a striking contrast with the blue leather used for the back frame in the previous video. Since this piece will support the booster section horizontally, it needs to be as strong as possible. Adding 2 layers of thick leather ensures that it's sturdy enough for the job. To start, I'll glue 1 piece of vegetable tan leather to the white goat skin and trace the template, including the stitching holes, using my scratch awl. I'll also make cross marks along the pattern for the decorative lines we'll add to the frame later. As you can see, I've already glued the template to cardboard, following the same process outlined in the previous video. Now, while the lines shown in the template are purely decorative, they do add a polished touch to the booster section's overall appearance. To create these lines, I'll use an edge creaser and a plastic ruler. I prefer using a plastic ruler here to avoid unnecessary wear on my metal creaser. Simply align the cross marks that extend beyond the template's edges, place the ruler in position and pass the creaser along the line. If you don't have an edge creaser, you can use an alternative tool with a similar shape, such as a plastic bone folder. Once the lines are complete, it's time to make the stitching holes. I'll use a round chisel and a poly mallet for this step. I'll begin by punching the holes needed to hold the booster section in place and then move on to the outer stitching holes, which will attach the white frame to the rest of the spaceship later on. Once again, it's crucial to ensure that the holes are spaced at the correct distance from each other. If you're using a 6-prong or larger chisels that doesn't align properly, it's best to punch each hole individually using a 1 or 2-prong chisel instead. With the stitching holes completed, we can now work on the 2 circles on the surface of the frame. To mark them, I'll use an old wing divider as a compass, guiding myself using the intersection of the lines we previously marked with the edge creaser. This intersection serves as the center of the frame, making it a perfect reference point for the wing divider as shown in the video. Next, I highlighted the circular marks with the edge creaser. It's important to take your time during this step since it's easy to slip and leave unwanted marks on the leather that cannot be undone later. Now it's time to remove the excess leather from the frame. I started with the center hole. While you could use a leather knife for this, I found it too awkward to work with in such a confined space. Instead, I opted for a hole puncher with a large diameter as shown in the video. This tool creates clean cuts in the leather, and all you need to do is punch along the interior hole until it's completely open. Next, we'll remove the excess leather from the exterior edges of the frame. For this, I use a cutting ruler and an X-Acto knife. When working on the edges, I recommend making small straight cuts at an angle. While there are edge cutters available with varying diameters, I don't have one, so I use my cutting ruler and leather knife instead. We'll sand the edges later to give them a smooth, rounded appearance. With the frame shaped, we'll now glue it to the second piece of vegetable tan leather. The finished piece will act as our guide for trimming and removing any excess leather once the glue has dried thoroughly. After the glue has dried, it's time to punch the stitching holes again. This step is much easier since the holes from the first layer act as guides, helping to keep the chisels aligned while punching through the second layer. Once all the excess leather has been removed from the frame, we can sand the edges using 180 or 220 grit sandpaper to smooth them out. Next, it's time to paint the edges. I'll be using Vernice Heatable Edge Paint and an Edge Paint applicator. This paint provides a beautiful smooth matte finish, but you'll need to apply several coats to cover any irregularities or lines between the leather layers. Once the paint is completely dry, I polish the edges using Tokonole burnishing gum and a small piece of canvas. A wooden slicker also works well to smooth any leftover fibers and achieve a professional finish. In the end, your frame should look something like this. Thanks for watching. In the next video, we'll move on to crafting the booster section of our project.